Hello, everybody. Give me just a brief minute to get my guest on. I'm so excited. I hope you guys are having a good day. I've got my drink. I hope that you have yours. Give me 1 second. Hello, everybody. How are y'all today? Check the comments. Can you guys hear me? Let's see. I'm going to take off these. Okay, I'm going to jump into it. I see that a few of you guys are on. I don't want to hold you guys up anymore because I'm so excited about today's show. So I want to welcome you guys to the very first Sip and Save Sunday with our a guest. We are doing a theme this month of mental health care. And so we decided to mix things up and do things a little bit different. If you guys are listening to this, you might only be listening through our podcast. Our Fierce Vision podcast is available anywhere that podcast platforms are. On this show, we wanted to normalize conversations around money and discovering how we can use the power of talking about it to grow from and support each other so we can step into the lives we've been envisioning. I had a different intention on how I would start this show, but with COVID-19 impacting so many people emotionally and financially, it seems fitting that I was pushed in the direction to start with the topic of mental health and money. In the same ways that we don't talk about mental health, I think it's because society for a really long time has created a lot of shame around both topics, both money and mental health. And thankfully, that seems to be changing just a little bit, but I wanted to help remove the stigma and highlight how common our struggles with both money and mental health are so that we feel more comfortable talking about it and so that we can admit we are experiencing it so that we have less obstacles asking for help before we need it. Numerous studies have shown that the number one cause of stress in America is money. And according to a survey done by Northwestern Mutual, 44% of Americans stress over money, not even closely followed by personal relationships, which only make up 25%, and then work at 18%. The American Psychological Association noted that 69% of its workers stress about money, and 72% of them admit to worrying about it while they're on the clock. Another survey I came across said that Americans who report poor financial health also tend to have poor physical health. And so 59% of them don't get routine checkups, 60% don't get regular exercise, and 38% skip preventative measures due to cost. And I'm sure that mental health is not excluded from the neglect in our health. It's probably actually neglected even more than our physical health. And so much like our physical health and mental health, we don't always seek care for our finances until something is so wrong that we can't ignore it, until we are in what I call crisis mode. And so I have invited a special guest with us today to talk about crisis mode because I know that COVID has forced a lot of us into this uncomfortable space, and we need to talk about it. And so Dr. Patrice Berry is a licensed clinical psychologist and has over 15 years of clinical experience. She received her master's degree and doctorates in clinical psychology from Regent University. And it was there that she learned how to ethically integrate faith into treatment. She provides outpatient therapy, psychological testing, and life business coaching at her private practice, Four Rivers Psychological Services, LLC. She has a history of overseeing a school-based therapeutic program for middle school and high school students in Spotsylvania County. She specializes in treating children, families, and adults with histories of trauma, adoption, depression, anxiety, and adjustment stage life issues. She also has a YouTube channel where she provides a brief and digestible educational videos that are absolutely worth watching. And most importantly, she is my friend. I wanted to highlight that, and I always want to highlight that with my guests, because while I have a professional relationship with her and she is a professional on the show, it is important to me that we always have these conversations from a very real and relatable perspective. I always want this to be a safe space where we're talking amongst friends. And so I hope these conversations inspire you to talk to your family and to your friends about, and your own mental health provider, professional, about how you're feeling. So please welcome to the show, my beautiful and fierce friend, Dr. Patrice Berry. How are you, Patrice?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I haven't seen you in real life in so long, and I think, short of, I've watched a lot of your YouTube videos and of course social media, I see you on there, but getting to have like a real conversation back and forth, it's been probably about a decade. You moved to Northern Virginia, I moved further south, and so we really haven't had a chance to see each other, but I see all the wonderful work you're doing in the community, and I was just so excited that you would honor my audience and come on here and talk about mental health care. So thank you.
These conversations are so important, especially right now, because there's just so much going on. And so I like being here, and I'll give my disclaimer now, and I might give it later. I am a clinical psychologist, but what we'll be talking about, because I'm here as a friend, and I bring my educational knowledge, like I bring information, but I can't talk about anybody's specific issues, or like, this isn't therapy. This is just us talking, us talking generally. And so people can ask general questions, and I love that. I really love people asking questions, and I like to put it out there, like if people are looking for help, how they can go about doing that, because it is hard to find the right person sometimes, most of the time. And so, yeah, thank you.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is a big deal, finding the right person. I know personally, there was two specific times that I needed to find a therapist. One, it took me several to go through. And then again, when I moved, the new employer that I work for didn't cover my old one. So you kind of have to start that process over. And it is very hard to find someone, one, that you feel connected to, that you feel understands you, that you feel like you can really be vulnerable with. And then and when you have to change, that becomes traumatic sometimes, because you have to start that experience all over again. You have to retell your stories, the hardest parts that you've already shared over again. And so a lot of people give up when they really need to go back to a mental health care provider because they don't want to start over. And so hopefully people feel encouraged to keep trying. There are so many wonderful therapists and psychologists out there who can serve you. And, there's lots of resources, and we'll drop in the comments later, if you can, just some places to look if they're trying to like research, the right person, to try to find somebody who's a good fit for them too. So thank you for saying that. I wanted to start off talking about, we all know that the topic for the day is, recovering from crisis mode. And so I wanted to start off by talking about what crisis is in the first place. I know in the finance world, it's important to distinguish between the difference between financial emergency and a financial crisis. So a financial emergency is when an expense pops up that you haven't planned for that can disrupt your financial stability. But a financial crisis is when there isn't enough money flowing in to support your livelihood. And so it's not a one-time event that could disrupt everything. It's every day feels like you're not sure how you're going to pay the cable. You're not sure how you're going to pay the electricity. Your daily livelihood is just not supported by the income that you have. And so that's the difference between an emergency and a crisis. And so a car breaking down can create a financial emergency, but loss of a job or maybe suddenly needing some medical care that devastates your finances can create a financial crisis. Or COVID-19 can create a financial crisis. And so I wanted to talk to you about what crisis mode is when it comes to just general mental health.
Yeah. And I like how we'll even talk about how a financial crisis can trigger a mental health crisis, or a mental health crisis can trigger a financial crisis. Because sometimes people, they get to a place where they're struggling going to work, and their mental health is starting to affect them on their job, or there's so much going on at home. And so really reaching out for help, and with financial things, because sometimes people don't communicate. And so if they can't make a bill, they won't even call the creditor. They won't even, like, a lot of times, because anxiety can come up, depression, all those things. And somebody might step back and really withdraw and struggle reaching out for help when maybe they do need some help. And I think it will look different for different people. Someone that's had a history in their past of maybe not being financially secure, they may actually have a ton of money. I've seen that happen where people had like a lot of money, but then they lost a job, and they ended up reacting instead of responding in the situation, and making decisions that weren't particularly helpful for them. And then other people, that a crisis comes up and they're able to think about it, they're able to manage things. I think it's also important of who you have around you. And not everybody needs to know your business. You don't need to put it out on online and everything. In the midst of this crisis, I took this opportunity for a crisis and turned it into clarity. I talk about finding clarity in crisis, because I started my YouTube channel in January and started doing Instagram, and that really gave me the motivation to launch Four Rivers. And when I lost my full-time position, because I was working in schools, and schools, they don't need in-person counseling right now. The agency I was with shifted, and I had an opportunity to stay, but it wasn't the right fit. The position that was offered, I needed to do something different. It was time for me to launch out on my own, which was scary. It was super duper scary. But in the midst of it, being able to stay grounded, because things can be falling apart all around you, and you can be okay. And if someone isn't okay, that's where reaching out to someone to get support through that time. Because sometimes things are just so blurry that people can't see what's actually in their hands or what's actually available to them. And maybe having to make some changes. COVID kind of made everybody like not be able to get their nails done, not be able to get their hair done. I saved money. I don't know. Besides like Amazon packages coming to my house, like as far as just doing other things, because we stopped eating out, like besides getting takeout. And so and so you can take it as an opportunity to, hey, I'm gonna get ahead. Right now, I don't have to pay my student loans, but I have some money to pay them. And so at 0% interest, I'm gonna pay those down, so that when that interest comes back up later, I'll be in a better place, instead of just blowing the money on something else. Let's go on ahead and get debt free.
So it's so funny that
Yes.
you mentioned that part about us not having to spend money. Right now, we're doing the No Spend September challenge in our Facebook group. And last year, one of the things that people, were worried about is back to school time, and the summer's almost over, and we got Labor Day right around the corner, and so people struggle with that last hurrah of spending in the summertime. But this year, we really can't do too much. And I joke that this should be the easiest no spend September that we've ever done, with the exception of course, Amazon ordering things. But something that you said about that takes me back to what you said about reacting versus responding. That nugget just sat with me. I really was sitting here thinking, like, there is a difference between reacting to something. It's a reflex where you haven't really put any thought into it. You're just taking the first action that kind of comes to mind, instead of responding, which is contemplating the action that you should take and then taking the right action. And so, like you said, reacting might mean shutting down. It might mean, not paying your bills. It might mean something drastic, where responding for you was thinking, how can I use this moment? How can I use this opportunity to move into a new career field? How can I optimize in this season? There are a lot of new businesses that are being started right now because people are responding to it. They're saying, okay, well, for example, face masks. There's so many new businesses that started just making face masks right now because they responded to the demand for protective gear. They saw that there was barely any face masks. They bought up all the material in Walmart. My mom's one of them. And, they bought all the elastic. And they started making things to respond. And I'm seeing all these new businesses that are coming out in this season because they're discovering new problems that have been created by COVID. And they're choosing to be the first person in front of it and solving it and using it as an opportunity to really grow. Crises can oftentimes bring about some of the biggest wealth booms if you have the keen eye to see it, the clarity to see it, right? That perfect vision that you need. And if you are willing to kind of do it scared, like to really just kind of lean into it. And that's something that I'm still kind of working through and learning how to do. But I can fully understand how everything is, just so scary. I was reading an article in GoodTherapy.com, and it noted that in a meta-analysis, 65 mental health studies involving over 34,000 participants indicated that people in debt are more than 3 times as likely to experience mental health issues than people who are not in debt. And individuals with overwhelming financial issues are also at a greater risk for depression, alcohol dependency, drug dependency, psychotic issues, and suicide completion than individuals who are free from financial stress. Suicide completion really just kind of, this made me really incredibly sad because financial issues plague the Black community disproportionately, which means that we're not only battling things like civil rights issues because of a lack of financial education and poverty, we're also battling chemical dependency, psychotic, and suicide issues at an alarming rate. And I mean, financial stability is literally the difference between life and death for many of us, and yet we aren't talking about it. And so I want to know if so many of us are really dealing with this, and I'm on social media, I'm not seeing a lot of people talking about it. Why do you think that is? And how can we make each other more comfortable sharing our truth?
And so I think that really comes down to vulnerability, people being vulnerable and opening up about their own journeys and their own history. I think people, especially Black people 40 years old and younger, are a little bit more likely to go to therapy, and even older, because I think sometimes their kids tell them, like, Mom, Dad, you need to go and see someone. I saw someone, it was really helpful. But I think systematic racism plays a big part in that, because there are so many roots of things that haven't been addressed. Especially for why the Black community does sometimes have higher rates of mental health and higher rates of certain things. And even the fact that COVID-19 affects African Americans at a higher rate. Yeah.
You're right.
And so, because the the death rate is higher for African Americans and people from the Latinx community. And so vulnerability, people opening up and saying, hey, I've been to therapy. For me, I first tried therapy when I was in grad school, and it was the wrong person. And I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I just thought, oh, you know, you go to a therapist and it didn't feel right. And it was just, I thought it was me. Like, but I never thought, oh, like, just try again. You'll find someone. And then later on, I came to another time in my life where I needed to, it was actually just like 3-4 years ago, I needed to reach out and find my own person. And I found the perfect, like, it was great. It was really great. I had to pay out of pocket, so I got better real fast, real fast. And out of pocket, like, that's ooh. And so he great, but did not accept my insurance. And so because accepts your insurance, has availability, those are all big things. Because even right now, my practice is totally full. And so my shift during this time has been from how to be, because I used to focus on cultural competence. I used to do that training for the agency I was with. I still do that training, but I've weaved in some anti-racism because we used to talk about cultural competence without addressing systematic racism. Because even recently, there was an African-American man that had the police called on him, and he was talking on his phone in a parking lot. And the person that called on him said he had a gun, but he didn't have a gun. He had a phone. And that call could have ended his life. And so he's like, get the details right. Like, the color of his car wasn't correct on the call. And the fact, because the person said he may have a gun, and he was on his iPhone. And so, like, seeing those things, hearing those things, because these things have been around for years and years. There just wasn't a national news that talked about it on a regular basis. We didn't have cell phones recording it. All these things didn't come to light. A lot of the people that I've worked with recently, some of the things that bring them into my office is because of stuff on the news, stuff going on within African American, feeling like, just struggling with being Black in America, which is hard. And I'm glad that I can create a safe space. And my goal is to help other people create those same type of spaces. And then just a tip, I don't watch the videos. I can't, because there is a such thing called secondary trauma. And I know that I experienced that after watching Philando Castile. That was the last one. That baby and that baby girl in the back seat calming down her mother. Like, I know. And so I read the information. I get the gist of things. If people post the videos, I do not, because sometimes Facebook will automatically play videos if you hover over it long enough. And I cannot. And it's okay. Because sometimes people are like, oh, does that make you like less of a Black person? Or I don't know, like people get weird about that. And that is for my own mental health, for my own sanity. So I can go to work the next day. Because I have my own business. I don't get mental health days. Like,
right. One that caused me to stop watching them too. It's not that I wasn't interested. I've heard people say you have to watch it because it's important. And it's like, I can know what's happening without watching it. I've seen enough videos to know the gist of what's going to happen. There's going to be some injustice. One of us is going to be slain, and odds are they were unarmed. And the Philando Castile one, when people were saying, Black, we needed to call in Black the next day, I felt that. I went to work the next day, and I remember sitting at my desk, and I never felt this much grief about a stranger. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like real grief. I wept about that night. And when I went to work the next day, I was trying to get into my work, and I was trying to be normal, but I was just quiet. And I never forget, my boss came, beside me and was like, "Are you okay today? You seem different from behind." And I was like, your energy was just completely off. And I was just like, I just started crying. I was just like, it's traumatic sometimes to be African American in this country, probably anywhere in the world, as a person of color. Constantly seeing your life kind of be disregarded, all while still trying to process all the other things we have going on in our life. We're still trying to process, divorce. We're still trying to process grief. We're still trying to process job loss. We're still trying to process raising a child by ourselves. We're still trying to process, children's behavior. We're still trying to process the demands of motherhood, the demands of, being a wife, the demands of being an employee, the demands of poor, cultural environment at work, like all the things we have on us, while still engaging with strangers who, we know have thoughts about us, have opinions about us, going on job interviews, knowing, the microaggressions and the attitudes they have about us kind of coming in there and trying to be strong through it all, like trying to be unbothered. So I felt that in so many ways. And I think, like you said, it's important for us to protect ourselves by creating some sort of barriers, like everything. We don't have to allow everything in, what I mean? We don't have to watch everything. We don't have to see this is why I don't watch like scary movies.
Same.
I don't enjoy having the nightmares at the end of the night. Like anybody who knows me knows I'm too scary. No, not for me. I don't need that energy. I hardly don't want to watch I almost didn't watch Get Out because I was like, is it scary?
I didn't. Too suspenseful. I didn't. I read it. I know what happened, but my husband loves that stuff. I don't. It's not for me. That's okay.
Something I've observed as a financial coach, and even in my own behavior, is that when people are in crisis mode, they often react in one of two ways. And it relates, as it relates to their money anyway. They either become paralyzed by the anxiety of it all and do nothing. They don't log in to check their bank accounts. They avoid their credit cards, looking at their credit scores. They stop answering phone calls. They stop checking their mail because it just becomes easier to avoid the issue than to deal with the fear and the stress of seeing those numbers on paper. The other reaction is that they go the other extreme and they take reckless action. And I guess that would be kind of related to what you said earlier, is they react, right? They are just reacting. And, that could mean that, they make decisions kind of too quickly to patch a hole. They go out and take out a payday loan, at a 300% interest rate. They go shopping or on vacation to kind of escape their reality. And so some people have learned that temporary high of shopping is like a way of reducing stress, and they're literally using retail therapy. And I've been there before. So, we know that everyone has and will experience stress and anxiety at some point in their life. So what are some healthier ways to cope with it and regulate that feeling of stress and anxiety instead of freezing or just kind of knocking things over?
And so the biggest thing is anxiety wants control. It wants to know, and it wants certainty. And right now, things aren't very certain. But, if I go shopping, sometimes people can, especially if they're still working and everything, it's like, I want to still be able to get things. I still want to be able, and you get a rush. So in the brain, your brain releases endorphins when you eat something sweet, especially a lot of carbs. When you alcohol has an opposite, because it's actually a depressant, so it makes you feel good for a minute, but then if someone is depressed, it can actually make them feel worse. And so that's where I advise people to be careful drinking alcohol when they're not in a good space, because it is literally a depressant. Now with CBD oil, I encourage people to talk with their medical doctor about is that an option for them? Because for some people that helps them with sleep at night. But a lot of times people confuse anxious thoughts with their own thoughts. And I have a YouTube video that goes into this a little bit more, but you want to intentionally do things that are helpful and challenge the anxiety. And so when anxiety shows up, that's where I want to say, that sounds like worry. And anxiety is actually good, because anxiety can if I didn't get anxious about being on time here today, then at 7, I might not have been, on at right when it was time. But too much anxiety will be like, oh my gosh, like if I can't be okay if I don't know, like that's where people might start to tremble, or they might start to get tension in their neck, or because the part of the brain that gets triggered is called the amygdala. That's the fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain. And you go into the survival mode sometimes. And so to stay out of that, really staying grounded, because sometimes your body's reacting like a bear is chasing you, but it's just an unexpected bill, which isn't good, but it's not a bear. Because if I react in that way, because if there really is a bear, then I don't need to think. Because if a bear is chasing me, I don't need to think, what kind of bear is that? It's a nice bear. Like you just need to run, like or do whatever you're supposed to do. I don't go out camping like that. Whatever you're supposed to do if a bear is chasing you, make sure to do that. And so anxiety in healthy amounts is good. Too much anxiety can make it to where people don't want to go out, or they end up avoiding things. And so finding healthy things, I really think physical activity is a really good thing to do right now, because I know COVID, I joke because I got my COVID-10, not COVID-19. I put on my little COVID pounds. And so like physical activity, it releases those same endorphins, but you often aren't going to feel like going to work out. You're not going to feel like eating healthy. You're not going to feel like getting enough sleep. And so sometimes doing things, even if you don't feel like it, can be really helpful. And even watching TV. So TV is a good distraction. It will distract you from the present moment, but it doesn't change your physiology, like getting outside or doing something active. And so that's where meditation, if people are into yoga or doing things that incorporate breathing, that incorporate grounding themselves, all of those things can be really helpful. And a lot of people do it naturally. So often people will have something that they fidget with when they start to get a little nervous, or like that's just those things work. And just focusing on, and if you do something unhealthy, do it sometimes, not all the time. So every now and then, going on Amazon, I try not to call it retail therapy, even though because when I get anxious I have a 3-year-old, and he just transitioned to pre-K 3. And every time he transitions to a new place in his daycare, I always start thinking, I always buy him a new book bag and buy him a new lunchbox. This past time he got a new nap mat, but I got to register for all of that for his birthday. So family members got him a lot of those things. And so if I check in with my emotions, if I'm on Amazon, it's like, how am I feeling? If I'm not in a good place, let's log off. Let's deal with that emotion. Save it for later.
Emotionally to see, am I spending right now because I am bored, because I'm anxious, because I'm sad? Like, why am I buying right now? What is the feel?
Bored is a big one that makes people like they'll spend stuff.
I was a bored shopper. I think I shared last week when I was talking about the No Spend September challenge that I got really addicted to thrifting and consignment shopping, because I felt like you're not spending a ton of money, so I'm not really damaging or breaking the bank, but I was just cramming a bunch of stuff in. And I was going initially because I was bored. I was just passing time. I love the idea of finding like treasures. Like it felt like a treasure hunt to come across, a pair of BCBG, shoes, or, just something that's like, oh my God, they price this at $3. They don't know what they have. But I was bored. That's all it was. And I really just needed to hang with my friends.
And I like that you said that too, because my my taste and my budget don't. So I love thrift shopping and go into consignment shops so that I don't spend more than a certain amount of money on stuff. But yes, like that is so good. But yes, boredom can really trigger people. Or you go look and you keep your purse in the car. So you can go, but keep the purse in the car.
Yeah. Leave your money
and
at
don't
home.
go back out to it. Home is even better.
So another article I read, and maybe it was like a podcast actually I was listening to, it talked about how financial stress or a lack of money can also lead to potentially damaging lifestyles. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, such as consuming unhealthy foods and substances, diminished personal hygiene, or limited access to education. And under these circumstances, family relations can deteriorate and lead to negative mental and emotional consequences for individuals within the family. So my next question is kind of three-part. It's kind of loaded because that's a lot to unpack. I know personally, when I'm dealing with an enormous amount of stress, or when I was dealing with it, when I'm reaching like crisis mode, the easiest way to know that I'm approaching it, because most people who know me cannot really tell if I am loaded. I have gotten really good at being the strong friend. But the easiest way to tell is looking at my house. When I'm in a great headspace, everything is in order. My sister will tell you I have a compartment for everything. The weave is in the weave box. The weave glue is in the weave glue box. The nail polish is like everything is pretty OCD. I'm very particular about everything having a place and everything matching in my house. But when I was worried about homelessness and I was spiraling out of control mentally, you could see the chaos in my head, in my house. I was letting laundry pile up, the dishes pile up. I mean, it was obvious that something was wrong. And so now I recognize that as like, I can see that as like almost like a clue. Like if I'm not sure, I'm like, hey, Betty, I don't know what's bothering you, but you're off. Check on yourself, check in with yourself, and, check in with your therapist because something's going on. So sometimes like before when I couldn't tell that forget about other people not recognizing that I was struggling. I didn't recognize it. But now that I know some of my signs that something's going on, like if I start seeing myself letting my house go, I kind of check in with myself like, are you good? Because so I didn't always know that about myself to recognize that I was spiraling to reach out for help in the first place. So when while I'm sure lifestyle changes, like eating unhealthy foods can be price related too. Some are eating unhealthy foods to cope with crisis and to escape their sadness and shame or frustration. Mental health and social emotional awareness is not something that we're learning about in school. So the average person like myself doesn't know how to recognize the signs. And so help people understand, like, how can people notice their signs? How can they know when they're doing things like consuming alcohol for therapy as opposed to social enjoyment?
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is emotional awareness. So being able to increase your emotional vocabulary, because most people, when they think about emotions, they just think about happy, mad, sad. And they don't really know that anger, I like to think of it as an umbrella emotion, that when someone is mad, there's usually something else under it. Like there's normally something deeper. There's normally some disrespect. Maybe they're feeling disrespected, or they're feeling like there's a much clearer, because just saying they're mad, they're not really getting to what's really going on. Because is it that they felt rejected, or like there's always, every time that someone has some anger, when we kind of talk about it, we always end up uncovering this other deeper thing. And so there's something called emotional intelligence and growing that. If you have kids, teaching them things like that now, because you'll often see like feelings charts in elementary school classrooms and things, because they want to get the kids, because if people can verbalize an emotion, it doesn't come out through behaviors, because emotions have to come out some way. Yeah. And so you might
You got me you got me thinking about babies. Like, they cry because they cannot verbalize, they can't communicate to you. And it's the only way they know how to tell you that something is wrong. And whew.
And so that's why they started teaching toddlers sign language, because they can under before they can express what they want, but they don't know how. Like, they don't have expressive language yet, but they can do it through sign. They can say more, they can say eat, they can ask for milk. They teach toddlers sign language because they can communicate non-verbally before they can communicate verbally. And so all those things are really interesting to me, because sometimes people get stuck emotionally, because of just the things in life, things that have happened. Sometimes when people get into crisis mode, it triggers past trauma, past negative life events, something from childhood, and that's where partnering with a good therapist. I don't mind life coaches. Like, as long, sometimes people work with a coach, as long as it's someone that's skilled to be able to act, and someone is seeing progress. And so being able to kind of uncover what some of those patterns are, and to not wait until you're in full-blown crisis mode. So for me, I start crying. So I get really, but in talking about something that's really bothering me, that I haven't really dealt with, like tear, but not like, but tears that don't really fit. Like, it's more than what you would expect. And so it's like, there's something deeper there. There's something else going on that I need to talk about. Because there's a fallacy, especially in the Black community, that strong means you don't need help. Strong means you don't need therapy. And Brene Brown has, if you Google Brene Brown,
I love her.
She changed my life. She's a unofficial mentor. Like, she doesn't even know it. But that woman gave me the power to say, hey, you can't have joy without being vulnerable. And I was raised by a single mom who worked, and who I never saw her struggle. We were homeless for a period of time, and I didn't even, like, I was a baby. So but you just looking at her, you would never ever know all that she's been through. But that kind of taught me to hide and not pay attention to what's going on. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to be a therapist, was to give, especially kids and teenagers, a safe space, because often adults will tell kids that they don't know how they feel, but they actually do. Like, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and we have to work through it. But giving them a safe space was really important. But then I realized I have to get the parents together, because I can fix that kid in 45 minutes, and that parent can break them in like half a second. And so I started doing more work with adults.
I can believe that. I'm going to deviate a little bit, because
Yes.
I was thinking about, just like what you said about kids knowing how they feel. And it is, we often have heard growing up, kids are to be seen and not heard. And, we've normalized children not having a voice and being able to express their feelings, or being human, even to, express that they're hurt, they're sad, they're angry. And I've been listening to a lot of Brene Brown recently, and it's really been causing me to kind of like really evaluate how I'm communicating in a way that can help give her more emotional intelligence awareness. And so one of the things that I started doing with her is I started having her write down how she was to write a letter to me. Like, we have this journal where we go back and forth, because I found that when she talks to me directly, she doesn't communicate everything she has to say. She's intimidated. Sure. There's that wall right there. But when she's writing, she knows I'm not going to interrupt her. She can get her full thought out. She can just say whatever it is that she needs to say, and she can go to sleep, and, we'll have this dialogue, and it's more honest that way. And having that journal helped me uncover that she was being bullied in school, and she was really dealing with a lot of things that I would not have known, because if I asked her how your day was today, she would tell me it was fine, And so, it's important that we give our children, a safe space, but also that we listen to them. Something else that I did recently is I took this, the 5 love languages quiz for kids, though, with her. And I was curious, because we're so similar in so many ways. And true to form, we have the same love language. And so I realized that I don't know that I was doing enough of communicating to her in her love language. So, I assumed that certain things would be more valuable to her, and I was surprised when she would say she would rather have this than have me say this to her rather than to do this with her. And so I realized, okay, so words of affirmation is her love language, that I needed to say things more. It was more important for me to build her up verbally than it was physically, or to give her gifts. And just like me, gifts was at the very bottom of the things. That's not how we love. And so I started talking to her in her love language more often, and I noticed a sharp shift in her behavior. Like, just the things that I would ask her to do, I wasn't having to debate with her. She was just, yes, ma'am, just doing them, reporting back. She turned her electronics into me voluntarily at night. I forgot that she's supposed to turn it in. She was like, here, mom, I forgot to give you my iPad too. And I was like, oh, she just, I loved her in her way. And then she just kind of started reciprocating. And I was thinking all this time, I wasn't really paying close attention to what moves her, and just kind of paying closer attention to her so that she feels safe, that she feels justified. And then a few days later, I asked her to do something, and she got upset about it, or she wanted me to do something, and I didn't do it at that moment. She got upset, and I could hear her kind of like moving heavily, like she was upset in the next room. And I said, come here. And I said, I understand that you're angry, and you're allowed to be angry. And this was the very first time I gave her permission to feel how she felt. In the past, I was always saying, like, you don't have a reason to be upset. All I asked you to do was clean your room. So, like, I am acknowledging that she doesn't want to do it, and that's going to make her upset. And there's no reason to pretend like that's not frustrating. I've been a kid. I know when I don't want to do it. And I'm constantly denying her feelings, and she is. But what I expressed to her was, but you have to learn how to express those feelings in a healthier way, to respond differently. I'm not telling you not to feel that way. And I felt like, man, that was a much healthier way of having her observe, one, to not be afraid to acknowledge that she's upset. Because I feel like in the past, she'd be like, I'm not angry.
Put that to your face.
Right. But just telling her, like, it's okay, just gave her permission to feel, and hopefully be able to communicate that more with both me and with other people when she is upset.
And you having been in therapy, you know that when someone acknowledges your feeling, you immediately feel a little better. I bet you in that moment, in that moment, she probably felt a little less angry. Like, because it's called validation of
yes. I know.
So it's
I'm always like, can you just I just want you to validate that my feelings come from a place that makes sense. I know that, and I never thought about it until you just said that was probably what that was for her, was to validate how she feels. Oh my God. So you kind of jumped ahead and kind of jumped into my next question, because I was going to say that, like, the second part of my question was, how they're deteriorating family relationships. And I'm sure, they deteriorate intimate relationships and even work relationships, kind of when you're in crisis mode and you're changing some of your behaviors, adding even more strain to how you're feeling, and, it impacting you even more mentally and emotionally. And I'm sure that many of us who are watching have watched our parents handle crisis. And a lot of us, we're modeling their example of how to function under that pressure. And so if our father drank to cope with crisis, then there's a good chance that we do that. And if our parents beat us when they're stressed or mad, then there's a good chance that we beat our kids. If our parents shut down when they're stressed out, then we probably shut down. And so if our parents went shopping to find joy, when they're in crisis mode, then we probably have adopted that same toxic financial habit to cope with emotional issues. And so I wanted to ask you, how we uncover the money traumas from our childhood that are impacting our decisions that we're making today and our ability to handle crisis. Like, how do we uncover like, woo, this is deep. Like I actually get this behavior. I've watched it consciously and I'm doing it. Like, how do we unpack that?
And if somebody has a money trauma that's significantly impacting their life, they're going to want to connect with a therapist, with a financial coach. Like they're going to want to include somebody else in it if they haven't been able to work it out on their own. And once again, normalizing that there's nothing wrong with reaching out for extra help. I work a lot with survivors of trauma, and many of them don't go on to abuse others, but some do pick up unhealthy patterns. And I'm a strong believer that people do the best they can with what they have, and I try to empower them with resources, and with hope that things can be different. Because often people they don't know what else to do, and so they go with what they know. And so I know even for myself with parenting, because kids are being parented different because the old ways don't work anymore. So the whole be seen but not heard, do what I say but not what I do, those things aren't working. And so I had to pick up some parenting books and did a few parenting classes just to be able to, I could use it clinically, but then I can also use it within my own life. And so if there are certain financial things, and people will be able to uncover whatever those buttons are, because maybe it's when their savings gets below a certain amount, or if they might not even have savings, because maybe they just lived, they're used to just going from check to check. And so being able to once again, I like that theme of respond and not react in crisis, because sometimes if you have history of things kind of being negative in the past, you might get stuck in what you've always done, and your brain might just, because you just want to get through this negative situation. But to me, you want to get through it thinking. And the best way to be able to do that is to be able to regulate your body, regulate your emotions, and be able to really sit back and take stock for what is going on with me. And some people need to talk with someone else to be able to uncover that. And so we were not made to constantly be on high alert all the time. That can really cause that can really increase a lot of negative things for people. And so I'm trying to not let, yeah, go ahead.
I'm so glad, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm so glad you that part. And you know, with COVID-19, you know, like you said, there's this period of uncertainty, and that is kind of where crisis comes in. We don't feel in control. We don't know where it's coming from. And it's lasted way longer than we expected. We expected it to be something short. And here we are in September, and this thing started in March. You know, it feels like it's going to go on. And so for people who are in this period of panic for long periods of time, you know, they're experiencing some very different physical symptoms. And I know for me personally, having felt like I was feeling so much anxiety and so much stress for a long period of time, I started noticing that my executive functioning skills were starting to diminish. I was forgetting things. I couldn't seem to like start. I couldn't remember. Like I seemed to be completely off. And it felt like this isn't normally like that. You know, I couldn't organize my thoughts, which created another bit of panic because I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. Like, what's going on that I can't, you know, articulate my thoughts like I used to. And I had learned that, you know, that spike in cortisol that you were talking about when you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, when it's like that for a very, very long time, you know, it does impact your ability to remember things, that parts of your body kind of shut down to compensate for the fact that your body is needing more energy to be on alert all the time. And so just thinking to some of my friends who, and even family who were going through mental health crisis. And I remember, for example, one of my relatives constantly saying that she forgot. Like we would say we have something going on and she'd be like, I forgot. And I remember thinking like, oh, there's no way that you forgot. But I also knew that she was going through some serious mental health issues during that time. And then I felt like, okay, it makes so much sense. And just having us know that those are the impacts of of trauma can help so many. And like, imagine families, you know, you having a falling out with a friend because, oh, they forgot your birthday again, or they didn't show up to something, but because you didn't understand how mental health impacts their memory, you were offended about something you shouldn't have been offended about because they really couldn't control that. And so it's just like, you know, just this conversation, the education about how your mental health can impact your, you know, your daily skills is just so major. So I just thank you for bringing that up, because I wanted to highlight that, you know, we don't realize how it can affect our ability just to function, just normal functioning skills. So you already kind of talked about kids, and I just want to make sure that we kind of really honed in on how we can teach our kids to work through crisis in healthier ways than we've learned. Do you have any other additional tips that you can think of that you want to share that you haven't already shared?
And so I have a Facebook group for people that have businesses. I share a lot in there, a lot of social, emotional intelligence things. Because right now, especially with kids being at home, a lot of kids are at home. And as parents, you can kind of augment their education to add in some gratitude, to add in, I mean, because in the midst of crisis, you need to be thankful for what you have. And so with every kid I work with, I'm asking them, what are you liking about online learning? And some of them, like, they're in every single one of them, they're able to be like, oh, I don't have to get up as early, or this or that. Or, and then also, what do you miss? So what do you miss about going into the school? And then also, sometimes in the midst of this crisis, some people are doing just fine. And so just because there's a crisis does not mean that you are all swept up in the midst of it. I love all the memes. I love all the, so I am an extrovert. My husband is an introvert. His life has changed very little. Like, he likes being home. And so, like, it's just really cool to see like how different people are impacted. And this has made me slow down, which has been good. It's been so good. At the same time, starting a business and all that other crazy stuff. But as parents, I think being able to teach them about emotions, teach them about social skills, monitoring their social media. Yes, monitoring social media is huge. September is Suicide Awareness Month, and suicide is the #2 cause of death for people 10 to 24. It's the second leading cause of death for that age range. Yeah, and that number has been going, because before, like, suicide was mostly an older white guy thing. Like a lot of African Americans didn't, like, it wasn't, but in the past 5, 10, 15 years, those numbers, it has no, there's, because being black people used to not really commit suicide that much. And so that's where having these conversations about managing mental health, if you are having certain thoughts, talking with someone about it. Just because you talk about it doesn't mean that you're crazy. That's another thing I like to talk about. Like, crazy isn't one of the things that I can diagnose people with. Like, there's depression, anxiety. I hate it when people throw out terms like bipolar, and it's not actually for what bipolar disorder actually is, and schizophrenia. Like, people just throw out terms and they don't use them correctly. And so reaching out for help. And if you are concerned about your kid, if your kid is saying things that are concerning, just checking in with the medical doctor, checking in with a counselor. It doesn't have to be a psychologist. It can be a licensed professional counselor, a licensed social worker, because sometimes you can get in faster. Because if you only want an African American psychologist, like, your wait list might be a little bit longer.
Right. That's very true, because I know so many people are desperately seeking African American female psychologists, therapists, and it is hard. I know from my own search. I remember looking for a therapist in May, and the wait was until August. They didn't have an opening till August, and it was like, man, if I was in crisis right now, like, I don't know if I can make it to August, ma'am. So sometimes you have to compromise on the demographic that you want to work with. But it's important to know that, like, I think not to assume that somebody who doesn't look like you can't serve you, can't speak to your needs in that moment. And so,
Because that's what my second therapist was. He was not, because I wanted a Black female, and he was neither. And so, but it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed, and it ended up working out great. But I wouldn't work with someone that I was getting vibes like didn't respect. I don't know, like like I don't know. I think I want to say it without saying it. If I was getting like
didn't understand your culture, didn't respect your
and had no desire to. No, I couldn't go for that. And so
that good. I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I think I want to make sure that I leave time to do our 10-question rapid fire Q&A. So don't worry, it'll be fun. It won't be scary. But before we get into those questions, I just wanted to ask you 2 more heavy questions. The first is there?
Do you mind? So I have to go. I have to go by 8. About
yes. Okay, we're at 8:03.
Yeah.
You need to get off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or we can do rapid fire. We can do rapid fire.
Yeah, we can definitely jump into rapid fire.
Yeah.
Then we can hang this up. So, okay, let me ask you just one question, and then we'll do rapid fire. How can a financial coach like myself work together with our clients, to support our clients in crisis mode, other than offering, recommending seeking therapy along with their coaching? Like, what can we be doing more of in our session to support them in healthy ways?
And so you're probably already doing a lot of it, like helping people develop a budget, giving that important foundational financial info, focusing on, because if somebody comes in and they're struggling, they're really concerned about losing their housing. We need to address that issue as soon as possible, because we can't talk about deeper things if they don't have a safe place to stay, if they don't have that security. And so, and then supporting, because let's say they do have a counselor, there might be some things that are coming up or that they might want to take to their counselor, because maybe they are starting to like, wait a minute, I think some of this is related to the past. Well, that would be great to talk with your counselor about it. Let's talk about how it relates to your finances. And they might be more likely to reach out to a financial coach than to reach out to a therapist. And so I was so glad, a friend of mine, when I needed to seek out some extra support, she was like, girl, you need therapy. And so, and I like, she was right. And it wasn't like, and that's where I think I was waiting for like my life to be falling apart. Like my life wasn't falling apart, but there was one aspect that I really needed some extra support with. And so, because I think sometimes people wait until they're in crisis. And so we can be preventative, because going when I went was more of a prevention. It was like, hey, like things aren't right, but I'm not, like, it's not affecting work. It's not affecting, but like, it really needs to be taken care of. And so being able, not waiting until everything is falling apart. And it can be hard to reach out and find a therapist. And so there are some additional websites. It's Therapy for Black Men and Therapy for Black Girls. If people are looking for therapists, specifically people of color. And so, yeah.
Thank you for saying that. That was such an important nugget. So before we go, I wanted to jump into rapid fire. So I'm just going to ask you 10 quick questions. First thing comes to your mind. First question. Are you ready?
Yes.
What was the last show that you binge watched and loved?
It was Autism, Love on the Spectrum.
Oh,
Love on the Spectrum. Netflix.
Oh, you know what? I think that's on Netflix, right?
It was really cute. I just started Living Single, but I haven't finished it yet.
Like the TV show we grew up on in the 90s.
Hulu. Yeah.
What's your favorite drink to sip on?
Tea.
Tea. I love a good
Yeah,
tea.
black tea with some cream.
I love a chai tea. Today I'm sipping
Ah.
on a strawberry basil mojito. Um, who would be the first person to notice if you were in crisis mode?
My husband.
Finish the sentence. Therapy is.
Awesome.
Describe yourself as a teenager in 3 words.
Princess, athlete, and I was always in church.
What's your favorite color?
Red.
What's the best piece of advice you've received?
To let my husband parent his way. Men parent different than women. They really do. Like my husband can he can. So when I put our son to bed, like I have to rock him and brush his hair and read 3 stories. My husband can throw him up and down and they can wrestle and then he'll go right to sleep. I don't know. Yeah, but I'm but you're not doing it. So I had to let go. He doesn't have to do it my way. He just has to put him to bed. No problem. So, but to let him parent his way.
That's a good nugget. Where was the location of the vacation you had the most fun?
Hawaii.
I love Hawaii. Hawaii is the best.
Yes, we just ate. It's such good food.
I've been trying to find a chicken adobo like I had in Hawaii ever since I went there, and I cannot find it wrapped in a grape leaf. It was phenomenal. But where would you build your dream home?
Alexandria, if we could.
Okay.
It's expensive. So expensive. we wanted to.
Okay. Last question. A life with fierce vision. You fill in the sentence. A life with fierce vision is what?
A life well lived.
Yes. Thank you again, Patrice, for staying on with us. I know we went over and you have other stuff to do. I had so much talking to you. And this conversation helped me so much. I'm so honored that you made time to pour into my audience today. And I really hope that they found value in it. Please tell the people where they can find you. Let them know where all your apps are.
All right. And so on Facebook, it's /Dr. Patrice Berry, Dr. Patrice Berry. On Instagram, it's @Dr. Patrice Berry. And from Instagram, you can get links to my YouTube. And I have a link tree that has everything. And so that's out there on Instagram. You can follow, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps.
Okay, thank you. You guys, if you're watching, show your love. I'm so happy that you joined us today. And hopefully we can continue this conversation in the comments. I'm going to let you go so you can get to what you need to be doing next. And
thank you
guys for joining our show today. I will be back next week. We will have our guest, Jamila. She was supposed to be on last week, but she went into labor. She had her baby, and she is so committed and dedicated that she is going to jump in next week. We will be continuing the conversation about mental health. We're going to talk about loneliness next week. We're also going to talk about, showing up for people, how to communicate with people. A lot of times we feel like we're not being heard or we're afraid to share with other people because we feel like they're not listening. And so we're kind of going to dive into that, into being a really good support system when people are talking to you or need your support, and also how to ask for support and so that you don't feel lonely. And so we'll jump into that conversation next week. If you enjoyed this, show me some hearts, send your love. Let Patrice know how much you appreciate her time coming into this conversation. If you're watching the rewind, please let us know your favorite nuggets. There were so many wonderful nuggets that she dropped. I hope that you guys found value in this. I really hope that this has helped some of you guys, or will help some of you guys should you find yourself in crisis, should a loved one be in crisis. If you know someone who you feel like will really benefit from this conversation, please share it. Share it on your page, share it with them directly, share it in their inbox. However it is, tag them in the post. However it is, if you feel like, you never really know, you may not know who really needs to hear this conversation. And so if you feel compelled to just share some information, just so that way anybody a loved one you may know who may not be telling you that they're experiencing an extreme amount of anxiety can, hear this conversation and hopefully feel inspired to, use the resources that Patrice has provided with us today. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my strawberry mojito. It's very good, by the way. Very good. And I will see you guys next week. Talk to you later. Bye.